All right, 3, 2, 1. Welcome into another episode of Everything is Logistics, a podcast for the thinkers in freight. We are proudly presented by SPI Logistics. I'm your host, Blythe Burley, and we got Grace Sharkey back for another edition of Freight Friends. We only talked for about 26 minutes before we hit record, so we are starting to set some new records. We're going to keep the show hopefully pretty tight for y'all today and get into some really good content. Grace, how you doing? Oh, whoa, oh, whoa, whoa, whoa.
Excuse
Wait.
me. Yeah, it's football season, baby. We're back at it. So excited to see Kirk Cousins hopefully take us to a Super Bowl championship this year. But to be honest with you though, and this people will probably see this afterwards. Oh my god, I'll make like a pick and see if it happens. I want the Lions to win tonight so bad. I want it to happen so bad. It's gonna be the shocker across the world. So if it happens, then it's because I said it right here.
It's for the Cat Team Brotherhood for the benefit of us
Yes!
all.
Cat
The Jaguars
team.
didn't fare too well against them last year in the playoffs. And so, I'm right there with you. I hope they win. That might be the only win that they get all year, though.
Yeah. Whoa. Come.
I thought you're not
Yes,
a Lions fan.
I'm not, but it's just like the city needs it.
Yeah.
Like it's one of those. You get it. It's like,
I mean, when you come from we talked about a little bit about this earlier in the week on your Sirius show, where it takes so much to bring losing franchises into a winning mindset and not just seen as like a destination just to get a check. And
yeah.
so for the Jaguars, they were thought of that for a very long time. Urban Meyer hiring him did not make it any better, but the fact that we got the quarterback and the head coach, Doug Peterson, I think it's just such a blessing, in disguise that you can hit those two. Hopefully the Lions have hit on that because I think we have a culture change here in Jacksonville. And I'm trying not to get my hopes up too much because they have been crushed horribly before, but a franchise like the Lions, you're right, those fans are long overdue for something to cheer about. I think it's their Thanksgiving game. They haven't won it in years. But they're one of the two teams that has a Thanksgiving game that had them and the Cowboys.
It's the best Thanksgiving tradition. I went to one finally 2 years ago. 3 years ago, maybe, against the Bears. Lost, of course. And here's the thing. It's always like that last quarter. I think the most upsetting was that Aaron Rodgers, Hail Mary one year. Like, we were winning and it came down to seconds and he somehow just tossed that thing back. But it's fun. I love going to those games because you get the turkey leg, and it's a different way to experience Thanksgiving, especially at that time. Like, my sister was kind of out of state, so our Thanksgiving dinner that year was me, my brother, and my parents. And I was like, this is lame.
Oh.
We're not doing this. We're going somewhere. So yeah, that's a fun experience. And college football's back too. Michigan State's rolling. It's I live right probably 5 minutes from the stadium. So
cool.
Yeah, I love it. It's fall. It's my favorite time of year.
So what does game day look like? A Saturday game day? Can you leave your house?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's funny.
Okay.
I'm a big proponent of the bus on those days. Especially if I'm going to the game or going to campus, right? I just hop on the bus, get down there, and everyone's on their way to the game, and it's just such a cool atmosphere, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's just so much fun. You stop by QD, get some donuts, get some cider, get some what do you call the red hot stuff, right? The
Cheetos?
No, the drink.
Oh, I don't know.
The Fireball. There we go.
Oh God. Oh, that takes me back.
Mix that with some cider, keep it going. Or it's Hennessy's usually where I go on that.
Yeah,
but
bourbon for sure, and the cider.
Yeah, it's a fun, and then you get home mid-afternoon for after 12 o'clock game, and now it's nap time, and then you get up for the big late game. So it's it's a fun place to be. I've definitely missed it when I was up in Grand Rapids, kind of that Saturday college football. I'll tell you what though, every time I think it's what movie is that? Dazed and Confused. Every time I go down there, I'm like, I stay the same age and these girls keep getting younger. I'm like, Jesus, what are this? Is a high school kids out here? Like,
Oh no.
so sad. So yeah. So well, and MSU has like you can drink on campus. We don't have like so it's like really funny to watch people like you cross the street and like halfway across the street, everyone's just like fountain. So it's fun.
That's it's kind of the, I guess, a similar vibe here in Jacksonville where we don't necessarily have like set tailgating areas. There's like paid parking around the stadium, but
Yeah.
everywhere else is like homes and businesses. So they just rent out their land on game days, and so it's just packed to the house.
Nice.
Like it's just packed out. We've had the same tailgating spot, or my dad has tailgated there every single year since inaugural season. So since like 95,
Oh,
he's had
that's
the
so
same
cool.
tailgating spot. And so it's evolved into like this tradition. The only thing though I do miss slash love is like occasionally at the end of December when the NFL is allowed to have like those Saturday games. I love that because we get to
Yeah.
recover on Sunday, whereas Sunday is just so long.
I
It's
think
like
that's
your
why I
tail.
like college football because I'm like, no, I want to rage on a Saturday
Yes.
and then spend all day on the couch under my blanket recovering, watching the NFL. So
Yeah, that's got to be so fan. I mean, I'm like a casual college football fan, but the NFL is just where I don't, as I get older, like I don't have enough emotional and financial space, like headspace to support more than one team. I used to be
yeah,
big fans of like the Red Sox and like I don't know, the Lightning and like a few other teams. I just
lightning, love
can't
that.
give them what I give the Jaguars.
Yeah,
It's too much. So I'm
good.
emotionally devoted to one team now, casual fan of everything else.
Well, it sounds like it's working out for them.
For now. I mean, they've easily taken like 10 years off of my life with the stress of following this team. But enough of all that. Yeah,
Yes,
I'm sure maybe the folks are sick of hearing, like, I sign in my emails like the annoying Jaguars fan to
love
like
that.
sales emails that I send out. So I'm sure like people are sick of hearing that, but it is a good conversation starter, which
Love
is
it.
why I still love talking about sports just in general. But what's kind of interesting is to see the coverage that we have in sports and watch it sort of trickle into other industries. And I think that that's a good segue to start talking about the major Flexport news that just dropped,
Yeah.
related to, we'll get to that one in just a second, but it's kind of related to this first topic of what if freight tech companies were as honest with their employees as Dave Portnoy, CEO, founder of Barstool, is with his employees. And I'm going to bring up this tweet. So if you're just listening, I'm going to share a screen of the Dave Portnoy tweet, who he was talking about basically after, in our last episode, we talked about how he took back over the bar. He bought the company back for $1 after selling it for millions, hundreds of millions. And so he's on a tear right now. And it's fantastic to
So
see him
good.
kind of digging into the media business side of things, which I know we're both really fascinated by. We both work in media, fascinated by how other industries treat media, and sports just is such a beacon at the top that it affects all other industries and how it's covered. And so with this first tweet that we show, it is Dave Portnoy, and he's asking, how was Barstool losing money? We're jumping out of planes and filming it like we're filming Mission Impossible 8. Don't get me wrong, this is an unreal production value. You will also never see this again, so enjoy it, which I think is just so great because it's a produced video. But
Oh,
Barstool is very infamous for using the, I guess, in-office drama. Is that a safe assessment?
yeah, 1,000%. I mean, it's over the last they just let 100 people go last week. And so he's before even that happened, I think last episode we talked about the fact that no one was in the office the day that he bought it, and he was like, y'all are going to regret this because we're going to have to make cuts. I mean, you buy your company back for $1, you've lost value, and here's what's interesting about them is that you've went from basically creating content to get people to gamble with Penn.
Mhm.
That was the whole point. And as happy as we've talked about this past we are that that's kind of done, now it's back to a straight up just media company. And that's really his point in all this, is that like, no, we don't have the budget of Penn anymore. We have the budget of a non-profitable company. I think he was telling people we lost $12 million last year. So how are we making that up? And it makes me laugh because I think about a lot of like the freight tech companies or even brokerages that we've talked about that are losing money hand over fist. And I wonder sometimes, like, why don't companies talk to their employees like he does? Now, I think there's situations that are meant for content that I think are lightly inappropriate for a different setting that's not using that to make content, right? But I mean, like, even those situations, like he's telling people, like, listen, like, we're gonna lose 100 people, and it's gonna be people that are, there's a lot of producers that people are fans of, a lot of behind the scenes people that now are going to the people that are left are going to have to take up their role. And that's like one thing that he like got on one of his employees for last 2 weeks ago, was like he complained about one person being gone. He's like, I have to fire 100. And so I think the employee came back and said, well, how are we supposed to blog then on the weekend? And he's like, someone else does it. Like, you got to make it up where you can. And as much as that it's harsh, I think in a startup setting, it's fair to explain that to people. And I think I've said this on the show before, even in a lot of what we write about or layoff situations and things like that, it's like I write those stories as and try to explain in a way that makes business sense so that people understand the companies that they're getting into and the business model that they're getting into. There's a huge difference between joining the procurement process of or coming out of like a supply chain degree and joining let's say
like
Johnson and
Gartner or
Johnson.
something.
Yeah. Right? Like someone who's huge, where it's like they're not going anywhere. If they do have cuts, you know, it's they're probably a little bit more analytical and seeing further down the line than a startup is, right? And then you have people who are joining, you know, startups that we've seen have layoffs, Convoy, if we've talked about Flock in the past, stuff like that. And it really irritates me sometimes talking to individuals who are like, I just didn't see this coming. And it's like, how? You're in a startup environment in an industry that's like just struggling. I mean, like, not that I think anything is wrong with my job here at Freightways, but I'm constantly working and sometimes even adding stuff to the work I'm doing for the company because I want to show that value. But also, we're a pirate ship and we want to get shit done and we want to take Freightways to a certain level. And that's probably going to be a little bit more work outside of whatever you feel like your salary tells you it's worth. And I just think that sometimes our generation, my generation, is really, as much as I am for and love the whole employee rights thing, because I think that stuff is absolutely true. Like, you shouldn't treat employees like shit. That's kind of where some points I disagree with Portnoy in a more professional setting. But you have to understand the business model that's behind it and the economics behind it and have those conversations. Like, listen, I'm not, you don't have to be transparent and maybe what the company is losing, but what do I need to do here to make sure that I'm solidified if something were to happen? And how can I, how can I showcase that value?
And understanding the business model of whatever company you're working for or working at, it's even from like a marketing perspective, I scream to marketers, you have to understand where revenue is coming from. Otherwise, you're never going to be able to justify your role. And so if you don't have that deep understanding, it's not enough to just write some blogs each week. You need to know what kind of traffic that is having an impact on your audience. What are they liking? What do they want to see more of? And then you have to do more of what they like and do less of what they don't like. And so there's all these different variables that it's almost like it's not just a business ROI, but what your personal ROI is. And maybe working at a startup is not right for you because you're going to be working, 60, 70 hours a week. Do you want your work-life balance? If you want work-life balance, then go get a traditional 8 to 5 job, show up right at 8 and leave right at 5. But for some companies, if you really want something greater out of life, you're going to have to work the odd hours. You're going to have to work longer than what is traditionally thought of. But the thing is, like, if you typically you get back what you put in. And
Exactly. Yeah.
it's a personal investment, it's a personal choice. And I think that you're right, where it's like a lot of like the millennials, Gen Z, they have this glorified view of what work is. And it's like, look at the economy, look
Mhm.
at where it's things are making money and things are losing money. Try to invest in careers that are going to be making money for the long run, and then be prepared to work. Because if you are prepared to work, from the time maybe you're 24 to the time that you're 40, that those years can determine how you spend the rest of your life. So
Yeah.
do you want to bust ass now while you have a lot of energy, or do you want to wake up at 40 and think, "Oh my god, I've wasted so much time. I could have been building, I could have been compounding on all of the different things that I've done over the last 20 years, and how that's going to affect the next 40 years of my life."
Yeah, and I don't want people to think that like one is better than the other. I just want
Right.
people to understand the circumstances that they're in and say to themselves, like, you know, is that something I want, or is that something I mean, I think we've even talked about in the situation I'm in. Like, I've been offered positions to go back into brokerage and kind of be in that same role, but I don't want that. I enjoy, and we were just talking about this, like, I enjoy being able to go get lunch with my dad if I want
Mhm.
to. I enjoy it. And I have to work harder to make up for the income of the difference. And I've put in that work earlier that kind of, helps make that decision as
Or
well.
work a little late. I think you were just
Yeah.
talking about how you were
Yeah.
working until 1 a.m. So, I
Yeah.
mean, it's those I think that's also where a lot of folks that they get a little tripped up, and they expect a certain set schedule, but then they value something that's not part of that schedule.
Yes.
And you have to take personal accountability, personal responsibility to get that shit done, even if you make those choices during the day that are going to prevent
Mhm.
you, or maybe delay you a little bit longer than getting that job done.
Yeah.
For this particular situation, using Dave, I guess, as the catalyst of where he's talking about, companies waste, or his company wasting money on just stuff that just is not necessary. Where do you think in freight that money is just obscenely wasted?
Yeah, I think that to bring up marketing again, I want to say marketing in particular, but I think I'm more of when I say that, I think it's more of how companies attack their marketing side of things. There's and I just I hate to say this because I don't want people to think, of course she's gonna say that because of like what she does and what she's doing here with Blythe, but like I think people underestimate outsourcing it more than they should. I've been in the position before where you're hiring talented, wonderful, talented people who have no experience in this industry. And the amount of I think people don't realize the amount of time that it takes for you to help them understand what they're marketing, the importance of it, without any industry experience can be really rough. And a lot of times when I talk to different departments and things like that, it's like, oh my God, like the value of the product that you're building is just like going right over your head. Like,
Mm.
and maybe point A and B are important. And you're right, those are how your technology is helping. But like, that's the tip of the iceberg. There's C, D, E, F, and G that add up to even more of a better ROI or return in different departments. But I feel like sometimes because of how people invest in their marketing, that those points are never hit. And so there's PR firms out there that specialize right in these areas. There's uh, Blythe, people like you, right, who have the expertise, and that's why I'm like, yeah, people are like, here we go. But it's true, and I mean, I think it truly works, and because it's just a weird industry. And I think what upsets me is that we, especially in the freight tech world, right, there's so many fingers that are pointed that are like, oh, well, that wasn't built by people who come from the industry, so like, why should we trust it? Okay, then take that and throw that same energy at your marketing department, because it's like, how do you, because that's what's selling your product at the end of the day, and
Right.
that's what's helping shape the messaging behind it. So for you to say that tech companies can't build engineers who are built as engineers can't build something without the help. That doesn't make sense to me. Your marketing department doesn't mirror that same concept too. So I think that's a big area that people should consider a little bit more.
100%, because when I got started, and I started out as an executive assistant who was then given all of the marketing stuff because I merely had a present, because I had a blog, and because I was present on social media. So it was one of those things where like, here, take it and run. And thankfully I had, a boss that was going to invest in me, that answered a lot of my questions that were very elementary. But it took me a hell of a long time to learn what works. I spent so much time just trying to make a PDF presentation that looked good. And there was endless edits to it. So it's like the PDF presentation is like, okay, well, that looks good. So if people like this, then I can take this similar format and I can mold it to the website because I already know that they like this. So I'm going to take it here. And then for a lot of the social media, I had no idea what I was doing. I did a lot of the traditional stuff that you see a lot of freight companies still doing today. They're doing like happy Labor Day from our team to yours. Nobody cares. They're just keep scrolling. That doesn't impact folks at all. But I think for, I would say, what do you think? Like 65% of freight companies market that way. And I would use quotation marks as like market themselves that way. There's really only a very small amount of companies in the logistics industry that are doing creative things when it comes to marketing. But then everybody else is kind of doing okay things. And then the rest, I would say probably 60% are doing marketing things that they think are valuable, but have no value whatsoever. I just got done with on FreightWaves Presents and talking with Bill Priestley and Kevin Hill on what some companies can do to set the foundation of their marketing. If you are a marketer that's looking to kind of up their level, their knowledge level, I mean, it's sad to say there's not a lot of resources unless you go internal. I mean, I worked at a trucking company for 5 years. I only knew trucking. I didn't know how intermodal interacts with it. I didn't know how maritime interacts with it. Planes, all of these other things that have anything to do warehousing, robotics. I didn't know any of that until I started the podcast. And so starting the podcast was my education level, or trying to get educated. But a lot of marketers don't have that luxury. So what would you, I guess, maybe suggest to those marketers who they're coming in from like an internship and they're working at the what would you suggest to them to learn more about the industry before they make a fool of themselves?
I would say first, if you already have the job, right, and you're already in it, like shadow employees and work and see exactly, especially the sales team, like what's winning over the phone, what pitches are they using that's bringing in customers, and take those pitches and run with them and figure out creative ways to draw an audience in around that, right? And then I mean, the fun thing about being on the logistics side too is that you're catering to both shippers and carriers. So same thing. So the carrier department, see what, let's say that you're sitting there and there's a carrier rep that every carrier loves, who's like never has issues, and use them to spotlight some of the carrier work that you're doing. Right. Like, and I think that's probably the best way if you already have the job. If you don't, I would consider, if you want to be in this working in marketing in this industry long term, right? Like, know that you're going into it, because I think it would just be really hard to bounce from a logistics marketing job to like any other industry. It's hard to like kind of like bring that over. It might help you with like different like types of pitches and working with different like types of customers, like enterprise versus more small, medium-sized companies. But really like sit and ask like what they need from you, and ask about budgets and things that are important, I think, to the job that you're hoping to do, and ask the support, right? Like, how available are you? If I have a question, are you really, can I reach out to you at any point in the day, right? In your situation, you're able to do that. But in a startup environment, like getting a CEO to help you understand what a partial load is like, no, I've got so much stuff going on. And that's kind of goes back to like the expectations things. Like, you shouldn't hate the CEO for that.
Mm-hmm.
You should actually really like that they hired you for that role and they want you to run with it. But again, it's kind of setting expectations before you start that endeavor and realizing, okay, this is going to be a lot more work than maybe I thought, and what your resources are, right? We talk about waste, like, are your resources good? Are they not? And judge your background and whether or not you can do that job.
I think you hit the nail on the head. And one way to really sort of expedite that shadowing process of what every marketer should be doing on a regular basis is also just get a tool like Otter.ai. I swear
Yeah.
they're not a sponsor of the show. I feel like I
Yeah,
mention them in
right?
every piece of
Love
content that I
them.
create. But they automatically, for folks who don't know, they automatically join meetings. So you could set it up where you have an Otter AI team account. It auto joins every sales call, every client call, customer call, creates a list of creates a transcription of that conversation, and then creates a list of takeaways. And you could use that as sort of a database of training. So then that way you can read through, come up with your questions, and
So
then be
smart.
able to go back to the leadership team and be like, okay, well, what was meant here? What did you mean by this? Like, how can I phrase this a little bit differently, a little bit better? Is something that annoys the hell out of me, is something that I really learned the hard way during some of my first presentations, is looking for stock photos.
Yeah.
Basically, the only stock photos that are on the internet right now for the freight industry are European trucks. It's
Yeah.
getting a little bit better over the last 10 years, but I used European trucks on our website. And my boss was like, what do you know? He's like, we are a reefer care asset-based 3PL. We need
It's like
American
flatbeds
trucks.
everywhere.
He's like,
Look
we
at this
need
RGN.
American trucks with the reefer unit on the back of the truck. Otherwise, people are going to call us fraudulent. And I was like, I didn't know that until I messed up. So I think that there's, giving yourself a little bit of grace to mess up, but then also some of your best content can come from the things that you don't know that you find fascinating. So I would
Yeah.
almost embrace that too, where it's like, this industry, has traditionally been thought of as so boring, but that couldn't be further from the truth, that you have so many cool stories to tell of like cool shipments and, the logistics of which we always get into, and we'll get into a little bit later on in the show, but you have those stories within your office, and something that you may find really cool, I guarantee somebody else would find cool too, because a lot of these shippers, a lot of these customers, they don't know the ins and outs of freight either. And so with your content combined with the sales team and, like a meeting note-taking tool, you can combine all of those together to a nice little like Venn diagram of content that's going to generate brand awareness. And then that resonates with the shippers, the people you're trying to target, who aren't necessarily going to care if it's like a reefer truck or like a flatbed truck, unless they're, that's specific to their product that you're trying to haul, then that's a different story. So I kind of take that back a little bit, but the point still stands that you have some cool stories within your company, and don't be afraid to identify them, but also don't be afraid to be a constant learner. I think that that's where, a lot of marketers, they just kind of stay to themselves, and they're afraid to kind of ask questions, and be curious, ask those questions, sit in on those meetings, and then, take it from there. I think that's a good sort of starting point. Any other areas of freight that is, money is obscenely wasted? I would throw advertising out there, but that's the only one I can really think of, because a lot of these advertising firms, especially freight specific ones, they use the same photos for different companies. And kind of going back to, that point I just made about the lack of like truck photos that are on, these stock image sites. Take the extra step, take photos of your fleet if you have them, take photos of your office, make your content unique. Don't try not to use stock photos wherever as possible, but also audit the companies that you're outsourcing to, because they could be using a lot of the same materials on different different competitors. I mean, there was an instance where I outsourced a video that I wanted created to a freight marketing company, and that freight marketing company used my exact template for another company, and I was pissed off about it, and I never hired them again. So
awful
things that you got to keep in mind as solo marketers, as small team marketers, especially if you utilize outsourcing. So just those are a couple ways of where I think from my end where I see money being wasted. Is there anything else that you think is important to bring up?
I think if we're talking kind of on my end of things and a lot of the work that I do on a daily basis, I think automation in particular, a lot of the technology that we write about is almost more of a missed opportunity type of cost. The fear of spending money, I think, is the big one here. Especially, I won't get into it too much, but just some of this shit, I can swear on this, right? Some of the shit that I see like companies purchasing or doing, and I'm like, but you didn't want to even automate your back office. That shit's funny to me. I was talking to an individual in the space, and they were telling me how frustrating it is sometimes to sell technology to small, medium-sized players in the space. That the big players get it. They understand the investment. They understand what they want to scale to, what they want to get to, and the investment needed to get to that point. And something I think learning from Craig and here at Freight Waves is like moving quickly and understanding like you can't just sit on something that is going to make your company better, get it done, enact it, and see the payoff faster as well. But I think a lot of times in these, and I will say I get it. I understand you're watching your P&L. I understand brokers, especially right now, you got tight margins and you're entering into a situation where now shippers are going to start rebidding right for the next year, and they're going to start squeezing those down even more, and it's going to get people in a tight spot. But there's so many areas of waste and opportunity within a brokerage, and one of my favorites is just back office, like accounting in particular. And so often people say like, listen, that's just like, it's a lot of money that we're putting out there. But at the same time, you're the same company that's hiring and firing 30 people every single month, right? And so for me, it's like, I just like seeing, there's nothing I love more than seeing a company invest in something, especially something maybe I've written about and I've been passionate about, and see it work out for them. Everyone out there should go and check out oh god, what is the name of her company? I'm gonna look it up now because I don't know why it's blanking on me, because
It's like a back office company.
No, it's we're talking about a company that I think has grown in particular. I just am like overly okay. There we go. Trailer Transport, Brittany Trailer. You know her. I guarantee you know her if you haven't met her.
I think I saw her on your Instagram story the other day.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
So she's when I first met her, she was you probably were there too. She was a small carrier. She had just started her own trucking company, and don't even get me started on what people pay for events. So whatever, but she went to our Arkansas event, which for the position that she's in is probably a huge investment for her. She used that opportunity so well. She talked to every single tech company. She was taking notes. She was watching every single chat. She was just executing that investment so well. And out of that, she's now partnered with Turvo, which is again another investment, but one that has helped her scale immensely. Probably what I shared was an interview where she discussed how 2 years ago she said, I'm leaving a company, and she told all of the employees that she was working with that she was getting out of there, and now she's hired all of them, all of her past coworkers, right?
That's usually a good sign of a good company, is if the first, when you go out on your own and the first people are the company, or your first customers or employees are the first people that you worked with before.
For me, she's a perfect case study of taking the resources that honestly FreightWaves has opened up to her, whether that's individuals like myself who she can talk to on how to kind of execute and attack things, whether it's the opportunity to, I mean, Turbo then had her at the next event. They brought her to F3 that following year to showcase to people like what their technology was able to do.
That's
And I
cool.
know companies that have done 40 meetings with Turbo or companies like it and say no. And it's like she said, you know what? These are the tools that I need to grow and become successful. And in an environment where carriers are firing drivers and just struggling to figure it out. I mean, I've talked to her before. The market's hurting her, but she's still adding drivers and she's still growing. And she's invested in she's a carrier tech company. That's how
So
she markets herself.
that's
Like,
cool.
it's really cool. It's so fucking cool because I talk to drivers all day long about whether or not AI is like real. Like, we're still having that conversation. And it's like, stop it. Like, realize what you need to get to where you need to be and just jump right in. And
Right.
she's just like, I just sent her one of her marketing videos, and it's like, it's what's so cool about it, Blythe, is like it's trickled into her whole culture. Everyone that's working with her is like making these cool marketing videos, and
Oh,
like
that's cool.
it's just so
What's her company name
cool.
again?
Trailer Transport, TRAYLOR, transport, a transpo, TRANSPO.
Trailer
Uh,
Transpo.
yeah. And it's like, it's just so cool. And so I hope people understand that, like, if you can make the right investment in technology and you're into change management and focusing on how maybe your operations will change around it and just taking that jump, like, the ROI is always there, usually there. But it's
It's
on
definitely
you.
cool to hear, a
Yeah.
success story when so much is like just doomerism, like everything's
Yeah.
the sky is falling and there's no way out.
Right.
No, there's opportunity. As Littlefinger said in Game of Thrones,
Oh my
chaos is a
God.
ladder. So look for the
Yes.
opportunities in the middle of the chaos. And that sounds exactly like what she's done.
It's just so good. And it's like, I think I text her at least once or twice a week, like, nailed it. Like, it's how a trucking company should grow. And she's just
That's
like,
cool.
so good. Yeah. Everyone go check her out. She's absolutely
Is
incredible.
she on Instagram or is it
She's on
website?
Instagram, LinkedIn. I think it's Trailer. Uh, I always accidentally spell Taylor whenever I send her an email. Trailer, TRAYLOR, Transpo,
Oh,
TRANSPO.
wow. So there's a Y in there. So trailer transport with a Y. So TRAYLERTRANSPO. And we'll make sure to include a link.
TRAYLOR, because Trailer is Brittany's last name.
Oh, okay, okay, okay.
Yep.
We'll make sure that we put a link to her in the show notes to show off what good marketing looks like in the freight industry. I don't know how I'm going to transition to this next topic because this company has been historically very good at marketing. And I think that they are definitely one of the top companies when it comes to marketing. But we had a little bit of a news drop just yesterday, which I'm excited that it dropped yesterday so we can talk about it today, selfishly.
Yeah.
Grace, tell us a little bit about what the hell is going on with Flexport because Ryan Peterson is back.
Yeah, he's back. This is a wild story. Because I will say this was like all happening while I was on the radio too. So it was like me like picking up different feeds. So basically, what I'll go through timeline because I think that kind of helps with all this. So on the 6th, because this is coming out right
Of this
later
month?
on the 6th of this. So yesterday,
Okay.
September 6th. Uh, Dave Clark, who started off as a co-CEO, which sounds like we'll get into that in a second, started off as a co-CEO with Ryan Peterson, and then ended up taking a full-time CEO this summer, came out and said, hey, basically I had this chat with Ryan. We're not aligning 100% on where we want to take the company with the way the market's currently going, et cetera, et cetera. So we've just like basically just discussed this, which was the weirdest part about it. It seemed like it was very like quick and
Abrupt.
fast, which that will come up in a little bit later in the story. And so I'm going to step down and Ryan is going to come back. And Ryan was like, tweeted pretty quickly afterwards. I want to say 45 minutes afterwards, I'm back, down for it, etc. Now it came out probably 45 minutes after that there's a possibility that Clark is going to be running for governor of Texas.
Crazy.
Which is like, in today's society, why not? I guarantee with what he's gotten paid in the past at Amazon, he probably can self fund it. So that's a very interesting state. I mean, we just did an article about transportation and trade and how much Texas could really become a huge booming economy. So for someone who has been a part of that ride too, could be a lot of fun for him, I think, to be a part of that. But so that came out, and that helped me make more sense into kind of like the quickness of it. But then middle of the night, like I said, yeah, think about me, guys. I just like don't. I just take naps, periodical naps. It's like, and it's like very great. My doctor loves it, and I never hit REM, so it's no,
it's healthy lifestyle.
It's like super healthy, and like I'm definitely not working on it at all. And so I see, and Rachel ended up reporting it to this morning that there's suggestions and sources saying out there that now the quickness will make sense of this, that he was actually fired by the board. And what I think is I mean, we've all been in businesses where we feel things coming on, right? So I think it was probably one of those situations where someone pulled a card a little bit quicker. But it is a huge story because really what's happened here is you have someone who he told Rachel Premack perfectly, go check out the story. You have an individual who comes from Amazon. And if you see from Shopify and a number of acquisitions and moves that Flexport's made while with Dave Clark, it's clear that he was brought on to help create more of this full logistics facilitator where I can help either a Walmart, but I also have the capabilities of helping a mom and pop shop buy globally, trade globally, and then at the end of the day, last mile services, point of sale systems, customer service, etc. So it's kind of like this whole really
like logistics in a box.
Exactly what Amazon has done for their third-party sellers, right? There's like a phrase for it. I can't remember what it's Amazon something services, but
I know what you're talking about. It's on the tip of my tongue too.
Yeah. And
fulfillment services, I think.
Yes, AFS, that's what it is. So basically doing that at Flexport. And I think clearly it sounds like at some point Ryan can't, and it isn't working for where they want to take the company. And listen, Dave Clark seems like he's financially fine. He also seems like someone, especially if we're talking about going as governor, who would like to be maybe doing what he wants to in this time of his life. So if you have the opportunity to leave and do that, knowing that you're leaving a position that's not even really what you're passionate about to begin with, I'm also not surprised by it. And I think most of the industry is not surprised by it too, once he broke down and explained, what he was hired for and why that's not happening. I think we see that a lot in this space too. And it's always interesting to watch maybe some of these partnership, right? Those type of roles, chief of partnerships, or you see it in revenue as well. A lot of those individuals are brought on for, a certain way that a company is looking to maybe gain customers or gain a market share. And if it's not working out, then why am I hired here? There's like someone that could use Dave's experience, or Dave could just honestly retire or become the governor of Texas. So again, not completely surprised. What I am excited to see though out of this is like what happens next with Ryan coming back. He seemed very focused on his next steps in life. So
he had just joined YC Found, or was he YC or
nope, Founders Fund.
Oh, Founders Fund.
You're
Okay,
thinking of
okay.
Combinator. Yeah. Nope. Founders Fund. And that's, yeah, exactly. Like not that he was like over Flexport, but like he had an idea of what was going to happen next. So I am interested to see where this goes, especially if that's what they're going straight back to focusing on freight forwarding. I mean, uh, maybe they get rid of some of those acquisitions, but
Or the plane, even though the plane looks really cool. They
well,
have like a
the
Flexport
plane
plane.
they'll still use, right? That's the freight forwarding stuff right there. They just bought their own capacity, I guess. But yeah, it's exciting to see maybe what happens next there, and yeah, strange
It
leadership
feels,
movements.
I think it feels very abrupt.
Yes,
I think
yeah,
maybe if I'm reading between the lines, because I just pulled up Dave Clark's LinkedIn profile, and just a day ago, he shared like an exclusive, like Flexport exclusive launch event. Come by and
yes,
say hello. We'll be, sweet tech giveaways and some other surprises along the way. See you soon. He shared that a day ago on his
yeah,
LinkedIn profile. And I was, the reason I pulled up his LinkedIn profile, because I was curious, what was his logistics experience prior to Amazon? And it looks like it was just Amazon for looks like 6 + 4. That's yeah. So 22 years at Amazon. And I think that was his only logistics experience. And I say only as if that's not like a huge achievement. But if you're going to somebody like, I think Amazon and their business dealings is vastly different than like a freight
yes,
forwarder, where you have to understand all these customs rules and regulations,
nuances.
and
Yes,
for global countries, which are different for each and every country. So very interesting. I think that he did it kind of abruptly, because I think Ryan, probably would have wanted to control the message a little bit more than just Dave just dropping the news on his own Twitter and then saying peace. And then I from a communication standpoint, it looks like Dave wanted to be the first one at the jump to drop
yes,
the news. And I imagine that the PR department and the leadership team within Flexport was not entirely prepared for him to drop it that soon.
yeah,
But I like the "I'm back" tweet from Ryan Peterson, because you could tell like it's just so. I think it's really challenging to, first of all, the questionable decision of hiring a co-CEO, especially when you're such a figure as the founder. Like, you are a figurehead within logistics. Like, you are going on like the top podcasts in the world to talk about logistics. So you're almost, I would say, like him and Craig are like 1A, 1B as far as like the people who talk about logistics on the big like legacy platforms like a
yes,
Bloomberg, or it's not legacy, but like the All In podcast, which is insanely popular. But Ryan Peterson is a friend of those guys on that show, and he's
yeah,
spoken at their events. So I think it's really interesting to have such a big founder persona, and then think that hiring a co-CEO who is probably shares a lot of your same leadership qualities, that you would be able to balance that power. I just don't think, I think you got to have one person at the helm that is the ultimate decision maker, and then everybody else falls in line or follows suit, or, challenge where appropriate, of course. But I do think that move was doomed to fail from the beginning of hiring a co-CEO. And it feels like that's sort of the where a lot of other people are at. Would you agree, or would you think that co-CEOs work?
no.
The look on your face.
I remember, because I just remember when the news came out, I was like, ew. like, like it just in the back of my head, I'm like, oh, those must be really fun decision-making meetings,
Like, who's the final say? Like, if you're
exactly.
co-CEOs, that was one of the,
Who's driving the vision? That's like the whole point of a CEO, is to like drive that vision. And if you're telling me that, I mean, even in this situation, when they did announce it, they did say that there was like a transition period, like there wasn't
Mhm.
going to be absolute co-CEO situation. But that also tells me that the person might not be the right person for the job, because you have to take that time to transition them into it, to understand where you want the business to go. And I just felt like, uh, as big and the investments behind it that it was, like, I, I can only assume that the investors were like, great, yeah, yay, like that sounds solid. um but Yeah, so it's I think ironic, right, to see how it all ended, knowing that this is how it all started, because clearly that transition period did not work as if one hoped it would. It makes you feel like, okay, probably wasn't the best person to lead it, or the thought process of how to grow it, of what he was supposed to do, wasn't well thought out with too. So yeah, it's very interesting. And I just wonder, it's yeah, with someone like Ryan who does talk so much, like if we'll find out more within the
I
next
think
couple weeks.
with like, we were talking about freight marketing earlier, and I mentioned how I'm such a fan of their marketing, and I don't know how many of those people are still actually at Flexport. I think they were unfortunately involved in some of their layoffs about a year ago,
Mhm.
when the new CEO or co-CEO took over, and so I think some of those people are unfortunately not with the company anymore. But they were one of the first to create, like, hey, here are some people on Twitter that you should be following that work in the freight
Yes.
industry. So simple things like that, interview series, shining a spotlight on women in logistics. And one of my personal favorites, and I'll share it with you now, is the beer of lading. Is
What?
such. Have you ever seen this? They
No.
made
How do
their
I get
own
those?
beer, right?
Where are those sold at?
Well, Ryan tweeted this out in June of 2022, so about a year ago. I'm not
That's
sure
funny,
how they
dude.
actually have sold these or whatever. But if you're just listening, it's essentially a beer they made. Flexport made their own beer, and it has the label on it that calls "Beer of Lading." Obviously, a play on Bill of Lading. But then also like the graphic design and the bottom of it, where it looks like waves of the ocean and like little cargo ships in the way. The design is beautiful. The name
Yeah.
is insanely clever. I just think that somebody like Orion, who goes on all of these, sort of mainstream legacy podcasts, to have somebody like that is a fan of marketing like this, our industry needs it. And I don't know, what the ROI of something like a beer of lading can is. I just think it's fun, and I want more like fun freight marketing. And I don't know where you can
Yes.
buy this. Maybe that's a good decision, that or a good question that we could ask Ryan. But related to sort of what you were referring to as like the qualities and the leadership decisions of what's being made at the top, like who's driving the ship. There are during all of this, sort of kerfuffle that was happening yesterday. One member of the logistics community tweeted out this book that's called "Chasing Stars: The Myth of Talent and Portability of Performance." And he mentioned this book because of all of the points that you were sort of highlighting, and the fact of how are you going to bring in this company or bring in this person who's had a tremendous amount of success at another company, and how do you know that they're going to be a fit for your company? And maybe some of the warning signs were there ahead of time that should have probably been paid attention to. And so a few of these things, a few of the key takeaways from the book is that performance isn't always portable. The role of context, which sort of I guess puts a focus on, okay, if they were successful, what is the context of what they were successful in the industry and the company that they were working in the conditions of the economic environment of where they were working. If you were working, at a trucking company during 2020 to 2022, you were probably favoring, pretty well with rates. That success during that point versus this year is probably not going to translate, or maybe it won't translate. That remains to be seen. But there's a couple of other points here. One I thought was really interesting is in the book, it says the gender differences in portability, where it identifies an interesting gender dynamic where a women's performance appeared to be more portable than men's in the specific comment or context that he studied. This was attributed to the idea that women had to build more portable external networks because they may not have had much access to internal firm-based resources.
Oh my God, is this my life? Uh it's so funny. Oh my God, no, this is hilarious, because I feel like personally I had to do a little bit of that between my experiences, because I felt like I needed more of that external network in order to showcase my skills, or to
Like an insurance
provide.
policy.
Yeah, exactly, like a way for me to say, like, here is the skills that I have, and here are the people in different areas of our industry that can support that, right? That's incredible. I will say, starting off just on the portability of an employee, I will say that I think this often, and I think this is like part of the whole like non-compete discussion as well. I just, in the startup environment that I'd been in the past, we would oftentimes get individuals who were kind of like that star, which is another one that I think, I don't know if you've touched on it yet, but the
The
dangers
cost
of,
of
yeah,
the dangers of star hiring strategy. To companies that
yes,
seek to hire away star performers from competitors often find that these individuals do not perform as well in their new setting. This questions the wisdom of hiring strategies that prioritize the recruitment of high-performing individuals without consideration for how they will fit into the new environment.
that one
That's pretty spot
That one,
on.
yeah, and I've seen it happen over. Like when we first started, there was an individual. Like when it was three of us at the company, at one point we had hired like an all-star from a very good brokerage, and as a small broker, especially at the time where this was when the bond had changed for brokers, so there was a lot of a lot of brokers leaving the industry and a lot of new ones coming in who could afford the new bond.
What was it when it went from like 75 to 100,000 or something
Yes.
like that?
Yep. And so in that, like, we already were struggling to like showcase to carriers that we could pay our bills, right?
Hmm.
And so like this individual comes in and there's a good book that he could bring with him, but especially at the time, like we were flatbed oriented, and this was like, I want to say that he was like into like GFS type of moves, like these like food services and stuff like
Hmm.
that. It's like we don't have any reefer capacity. We don't have the ability to take huge losses. That was another one. There's another big company that we had, I wouldn't say took someone from, but someone from over there had come over and helped us, secure a customer, and was like just running losses nonstop.
Hmm.
And he had come from a different incentive system, and from a company who could take losses on all these loads. And it's just like, no, we aren't looking to organically grow that way. We're bootstrapping. And when you're bootstrapping, you can't cut your margins down to 1% in order to get by. So like that individual is actually costing us money. And I think you see that, I think, a lot in this industry is like, and that's why I think the whole non-compete thing is even funny to me, because how often do those individuals that you steal, how quickly can they bring that stuff
Hmm.
over? Like, especially the bigger the account, like, how easily is someone like Walmart going to say, oh yeah, you know what, yes, I'm going to move this completely over to a different company just because you're some guy I trust? No, you're a peon in their worlds. It's like, so I think that's a little bit of it. I think you see a positive star situation more on like a higher level of someone who's been in the industry for 30 years and just has that Rolodex and that um reputation built in the industry, where it's like, yeah, that person is going to close P&G for you.
Hmm.
That person is going to get you in the door for, sorry, there's a bug on my microphone. Is going to get you in the door to a bigger customer. But I don't think a lot of times that works 100%. And honestly, you end up finding out that a lot of those individuals are have really bad
Hmm.
behavior. They're that all-star who brought culture down. And at what point are you really willing to risk that? And like, how much business is this individual going to come in that's not also detrimental to the business that maybe is now coming out? So
Yeah, are they a team player? Are they going to did they get away with a bunch of shit at the other place
mhm,
that they worked at because they brought in so much business? And
exactly.
they maybe come into the new spot with a little bit of swagger and I think anytime you join a new company, you almost have to have a little bit of like a humbling part or a humble part of your personality where you got to learn
Yeah.
you got to learn new culture. You got to learn new what's allowed in the office, what's not allowed in the office. How do you collaborate with teammates and executives and the dynamics between all of that? So it's not necessarily transferable from one company to another. To your point.
Yeah, and I think we've witnessed maybe some individuals out there who are doing that, and it's
Oh, you stopped yourself there.
power to you. Go for it. I wish you all of luck, but it's like, uh, I sometimes our generation makes me laugh. We're so confident in ourselves sometimes, and it's like, put the work in, and that'll work out. But I also like there's people in this industry that we all know that do have that network and have
Hmm.
built up decades of time in order to pull that off. And just because it's easy for you to get an LLC and say that you're doing something doesn't mean it's necessarily going to happen. So we'll see.
Ooh, the shade.
So funny.
This is
I
this
saw
is the beauty of this conversation is that there's layers to it.
oh, there's layers, honey. Like like,
I
no,
did
it's
want to
oh, it's funny.
before
Every
we
episode I just like get too shady and I have to take phone calls afterwards.
well, speaking
But
of which, I want to move on to our next segment, but quickly, while we're talking about good and bad marketing, it's kind of like the theme so far in this show. I did want to showcase a company that is, I think, doing a stellar job of marketing. We've been talking, for I think you and I, Reed from Lost Freight, Craig, of course, everybody's been kind of pumping up Twitter/X and getting more getting more people from the freight industry to come over on the platform and just post more. Ryan Peterson is a perfect example of that with his great marketing. But another company that I wanted to highlight is Truck Stop.
dude,
I
oh my god, who did Truck Stop hire in the last couple months? That's so funny. Everyone, she didn't even tell me she was gonna say Truck Stop, and I was about to be like, if she says Truck Stop right now, yes, I support this thought process 100%. And if anyone at Truck Stop is listening right now, whoever is running your Twitter account is
whew,
killing it.
yes. They are doing so good. We're showing one of their latest tweets.
So
Obviously,
good.
we know that fraud is a big industry problem. It's only been getting worse and worse. And there are a bunch of companies that are kind of turning a blind eye to it a little bit, but there are other companies that are highlighting the problem, figuring out where the problems are, and offering solutions. And so Truck Stop is not hiding behind some of these things that they just released a tweet yesterday that they were highlighting all of the accounts denied by Truck Stop's fraud prevention in 2023. And so they have the branding, of course. I think, it's no surprise of who's, I guess maybe they're taking a shot at here. But this image is 7,155 accounts that they have blocked, and they're showcasing this as, hey, come work with us because we have the fraud prevention capabilities that you have been screaming from the high heavens for. And they're not afraid to talk about it, and they're not afraid to double down on it, which I love. I love when people go on social media and they have a hot take or I guess a quote unquote hot take, and they don't back down and they double down on it. It's like instant respect when a company is able to do that. And this isn't the only tweet that they've been firing off. They've been firing off a lot of different tweets or a lot of different posts on X, whatever we're calling it today. But it's really, really good. So, I just wanted to sort of co-sign what you just said. Whoever is running the Truck Stop Twitter account, kudos to you.
And I felt it. It's someone they hired someone in the previous quarter that it's got to be a millennial because they're using more emojis. They are. Can you see the replies? Their replies are so good. No, like how they're replying to other people's tweets. Like that's what's really been like how I've been enjoying is like, oh, someone is on there like putting in some actual work and like reading what people are saying. And I just again, whoever is running it, I'm feeling the presence. I'm enjoying it. It's like again, Blake and I did not like plan the. Yeah, see, look at these gifts.
It's like,
it's
the
so
bare
good.
minimum can work in freight right now.
I'm emailing Brent after this episode and telling him to give that person a high five because they again are just like that. It's funny like again neither of us had like told each other we're going to talk about this and we already had the same experience like I'm seeing it in the timeline. I'm seeing the response. Yeah, exactly. See, like, scammers
These
gonna
type,
scam.
yeah.
That's so simple. How do people just like kind of, how does that go over people's heads?
It's not
Like,
complicated. Whatever conversation, or not whatever conversations are going off on the, the brokerage floor or the sales floor, like these are the kinds of conversations that you could be, some of them, not all of
yeah,
them. But some of them that you could be, having that gravitas, that little bit of a
yes,
swagger. Like, yeah, we've heard you. We know this is a problem. Here's our solutions. And hey, it's actually like a real person that's responding to this. It's not just like auto tweets with a few hashtags that nobody's going to click on and nobody's going to use. These are real replies. These are real interactions, real engagement. And that's all we want from people who are going on these social media platforms, is to have a personality, because your personality is going to get you talked about.
yeah, love it.
Okay.
Thank you so much for bringing that up.
No,
Because
but I just,
I felt that like a couple weeks ago. I remember they replied to something I did, and then I saw them replying to something else. Like, it might have been a Craig tweet or something, and I was like, this is new, like
somebody has a personality in freight. Like, we immediate
yes,
follow, like immediate interaction. Because I just, yeah, we're both big fans of that. It show you up authentically. That's what we mean. Like, have a
yes,
selling point and have a little bit of a swagger behind it, and not be afraid to have that confidence and be able to double down and not have to have every tweet go through, legal and all of the different approval processes. Just let your creative people be creative within, obviously, don't let them talk about like politics or religion or,
yeah,
anything like that, anything questionable like that. But if it's in their domain, let them boast about it. I guess this is kind of very much related, because the next segment is we're going to talk about our favorite hustles in freight. We have to pick one that's legal and then one that's illegal. So we got a cargo crimes portion of this, and then we also have businesses that are doing something in the freight space. Maybe it's a side hustle, maybe it's a little side quest that you're working on that we want to highlight on this show. And the first one I want to mention on the legal, like legitimate side of things, is ISO. It's a company called Isometric Technology, which bills themselves as an accurate data, all your data in one place as a single source of truth. Think of like a credit score for freight
yes,
brokers and carriers. And so shippers know who to work with more, but also from a brokerage perspective, from a carrier perspective, you have a better idea of what your data, how it's benchmarked against other brokers. And then also from a
hmm
carrier perspective, how you're performing against other carriers, where you can improve. And also, I think it's a really good benchmark to give yourself access to that data to know which shippers you're more beneficial. It works out better for you, so you can compare those numbers as to what freight you can go after more. So I think it's the first of the industry, and I think a couple people from Uber Freight are part of the executive team, part of the founder team. But that's a really cool business that I think is fairly new, that's coming onto the scene.
yeah. I was joking with Blythe before this because I quite literally just wrapped up a call with them before coming on here to learn more about what they're doing, and it's absolutely incredible. What's really cool about this too is like the data side of things. They are the benchmarking side, I think, is huge. I could see people inside themselves trying to say, listen, I think I can build this internally. Well, you can't, because you need to be
Mm.
Switzerland. You can't be a benchmarker. At least a smart shipper and a smart customer carrier should know internally that if the company I'm working with is creating their own benchmarking tool, well, they're probably benchmarking themselves better than they probably should, right? Like, they're going to skew, not even like in an unethical way, but like, why wouldn't you skew
Mhm.
that to showcase that you're the best? And this is a third party way of getting a true, like you said, credit score of where you stand in the industry. And it is, I mean, absolutely incredible. I mean, some of the stuff I was seeing, like there was there's a lot of, I think, math and statistics behind, especially more of a medium-sized brokerage with limited resources, that takes a lot of work in Tableau and takes a lot of analytics in order for you to solve. A perfect example is they have a tool that allows you to see how much money you're losing as a company from drop-off carriers. So let's say you're a big spot broker and you deal a lot with carriers taking a load. Oh, they call back an hour later, can't take it, sorry. Like, they can in an instant tell you how that difference, right? So like, let's say you rebook it for $100 more, how much you've spent as a company dealing with those situations. So let's say it comes back and it says that your company has lost $100,000 over the last year on drop-off carriers, which in my head means that we're probably not doing a great job building good carrier relationships. So if I'm losing $100,000 a year, I should probably invest in a $60,000 good carrier representative who's going to go out there and build carrier relationships. Or let's say that it comes back $100,000 and you're looking to invest in a carrier platform, something like, maybe, like off the top of my head, I'm thinking maybe like Parade or something like that. And now okay, like, I'm losing this. Like, you really get to see the ROI and some of the decisions that you make. And that's just difficult for, again, medium-sized broker, even some large ones, to truly wrap their head around. So it's like, they dive into those areas. You're right. They showcase to you like the lanes that you're killing it on, but the carriers that are maybe pulling down your performance. But it also benchmarks that same carrier's performance on that lane for other people. So like, let's say for other people, they're doing great, but for your company, they're just like shitting the bed. Well, I'll talk about what to do with your carrier reps. Pick up the phone and figure out what's happening there. And we always talk about, right, like how tech can help with the human side of things. That's the perfect example of it.
For sure.
That the benchmarking tool is absolutely. I got to really learn what that company was doing today. That's why it's like perfect timing that you bring this up. And yes, it's funny. I was sitting there really trying to think who could compete with this, and there's companies that might showcase the data side. I don't know if they get as in depth in terms of lanes, receivers, shippers, etc. But the benchmarking tool, that's a tough one to get around. And yeah, very excited to see how that company is going. Hopefully going to learn more about them, do some work with them as well. But it's there a lot of big names have brought them up to me in the past, and I'm excited to learn more about it, because I think that's just an incredible tool for those who don't have time to invest in a bunch of Tableau builders, right? Like within their own four walls.
Ugh.
Like, why
It's a
do
whole
that?
other, like, yeah, it's a whole other set of, I think, just realization of you can't improve what you don't measure. And when you're
Yeah.
in the trenches every day of just trying to survive and trying to get the next load covered, then it takes maybe a company like this to be able, or a service like this to be able to, maybe once a quarter, take a look back and take an eagle eye view of what's worked well and what hasn't worked well. And then you can build it into your daily routine, into your weekly routine of the things that you're trying to identify where you can offer those cost savings. And I think too, like, if you imagine, like, maybe like a regional, leader of, inside a brokerage, we used to have, like, Northeast, the person who was, the manager of, like, the Northeast, and he had a bunch of brokers underneath him, Southeast, Northwest, all that, different regions of the United States. But imagine, like, somebody like that being able to look at their numbers of what their team is doing, and then having a benchmark, and then being able, like, in the next 6 months, be able to go back to the executive team or the C-suite and say, hey, like, here's where we are, and here's how we made all of the improvements. Like, that is right there, financial ROI, like you are proving the value of you and your team from a very like deeply personal level. And it
Yeah.
could make for a good opportunity for, if this is working well for maybe this department, maybe it could work really well for the LTL department, or for, you know, maybe LTL is a, you know, a bad example to use here, but, you know, maybe those other regional divisions within your own company could stand to improve based on those things of what other departments are doing based on these numbers that you're getting.
Yeah. No, it's there's so many, and like I mean, to even dive into, like, you can potentially use that, right, to send your own shipper your performance, right, and showcase, like, here's why we need
Yes.
more lanes,
Great
or
marketing.
yes, yeah, put that into a beautiful little PDF, throw that
Anybody who
thing on
has over like a
LinkedIn.
700 credit score is like
Yeah,
probably bragging about it. You could be too, of your freight brokerage, that we have an 800 credit score. Come work with us. And any shipper would see that and be like,
yeah,
I'll listen.
exactly, and down to the lane, right? So, like, maybe something comes over and you're like, listen, this is just not in our lane, but we do have a carrier that runs it perfectly and has run it perfectly for others out there, but they're at $30 more,
Hmm.
like, yeah, blown away. That
Okay.
one,
So
good company.
legitimate business. Did you have one to share? Or do you want to move on to the cargo crimes aspect?
I'll highlight one really quick for everyone. This is like a company I wrote about, I think, a while ago, but I think when it comes to, again, a company that could really help a medium-sized brokerage get some customers that they might feel like they don't have the technology support for. It's a company called Orderful. Uh, Buddy Eric runs the company, and the best way to explain it is the company has built and also, like, has pretty much all of the EDI information needed to get set up with pretty much every large shipper company you could ship with available out there. And he's built this API, like, cloud. It's API for EDI powering.
Huh.
It allows you, because
Combining the enemies?
yes, right? Exactly. So if your system, you'd rather, like, set up an APIs, and you can create kind of that connection between the two. I've had the reason I learned about them was a company that I mean, you can read some of their stories too. I won't say the company's name, but they'd reached out to them on Christmas Eve to set up with a Fortune 10 shipper,
Oh, wow.
and had them up and running in less than 24 hours.
Wow.
So the way I kind of see them as a partner is, let's say you are a medium-sized company and you get that big shipper on the phone and they say, listen, we have to set up an EDI connection in order for me to tender you over anything. And then you've spent so much time trying to get the right person on the phone, right? Doing all this work, probably bidding, all this nonsense. And now you get to this point and you don't have someone in your back office that can do that. Well, you can reach out to this company and they'll do it for you
Oh, cool.
very quickly. I'm trying to think. I just saw on their site they had certain like up times, and I've honestly heard of faster. So if you're going through their back end integration, um, eh, eh, they
Cool.
say 9 days or less to go live. If you're using some other type of EDI service and they're just supporting you, then it's most EDI services are 90 days plus.
Hmm.
So it's like they've built almost like all the connections that you need to really get these large companies as a partner, to name some: Walmart, Schneider, Staples, Walgreens, Meyer, FedEx, Chewy, Aldi, Cisco, Volvo. So if you're looking to reach out to those customers and move their freight, they're going to tell you immediately, basically, who's your tech guy? Let me get in touch with our tech guy and we'll make the connections. If you don't have them there, you might lose that, right? Like, lose that customer and have to rebuild it. So really cool company. Again, just like ISO, heard incredible things from customers. And
Oh,
it's
beautiful site too.
yeah,
This is a
beautiful.
really well-designed site.
And it's just
Oh,
such a simple problem that so many people have. Um, yeah, read through some
Beautiful.
of the really great reviews from, and you
I
know what
love the
company is good?
testimonials, like front and center. That I love
Yes.
that. Love it.
Well, and what's interesting, right? Is like in flip the market. A lot of those were just shippers that you just saw. I mean, they were probably like, we need to be able to onboard some of these carriers and these brokers ASAP, right? Because we can't find capacity anywhere. And now in the opposite, now the other side, now they can help out those who want to get set up with Walmart right away so that they can, move those shipments and keep their business going. It's just such a, there's nothing I love more than a simple problem
Hmm.
that and someone finds a simple solution. There's no like crazy like movement from the company into other areas of integration. They're just like, no, this is what we do and we do it well, and here's people to tell you that you can trust us. So yeah, that's probably one of my favorites.
Okay, cool. Yeah, that's a great call out. And I'm gonna go explore like their website later because that is a beautiful site. Yeah, I don't typically say that about freight
Yeah,
companies because most of them don't have beautiful sites.
yeah.
But that is a beautiful site, following all of the things that I sort of preach about. But while we got about 15 minutes left, and we got to get to the logistics of stories. And for mine, I'm going to tie in a cargo crime aspect to it at the end. So I don't know if maybe you want to set up your logistics of
Yes.
source to porch story, which is what we're calling it now. So source to porch, which is the logistics of, and then we each pick a product that we like learning about the logistics process of it. So set up yours for us really quick.
So mine is, you're probably like, goodness, decorations in stores now. Why are we going this way? I'm bringing this type of company up because if you are trying to sell out there and get these accounts, today is the day that you need to move on them, because if you don't land these accounts by like October minimum, you're probably not going to move any of this freight at all this year. And that's good old Christmas trees. First off, big Christmas gal here. Love the holiday, all about it. Love a Christmas tree. Love a real one. Do you own a fake one though? I Christmas tree are an insane thing to move. They're funny because you cannot trust pretty much any type of ratings tool to truly figure out what their rates are. I remember just botching an RFP one year because I did not realize how much especially the Northwest, the Pacific Northwest, how much like it costs to move these trees. And now as you're watching this, like realize how much work goes into not only like getting them prepared to move, how dirty that is, right? So drivers hate
Heavy.
it. Yeah, heavy. And it takes so much time to load these things. And also add on top of it, they're a special type of freight that has a deadline to hit on delivery, or else they're completely worthless. Unless you're one of those freaks of nature who keeps your trees up till March, which is not me. I am not that person. I love Christmas when Christmas is due. But that Dutchman right there is a huge one, and you could see how big their plan is. So it's like you can't just send any carrier in who can't drive on let's right there in through snow throughout those aren't paved roads right there. And that's a lot of times you'll get these, and those loads take hours and hours to load. And they have special delivery requirements. A lot of times they're in vans or reefers,
cool.
depending on the temperature outside. So they take a lot of work. And I just love I love a segment of the industry that has like such a tight deadline, right? It's like reminds me of like pumpkin season. Like they come
Yes.
out and they get delivered in a certain amount of time, and that's it. Same thing for these, right? Like they're
And fireworks too, like
Yes,
any of
yep.
those like facilities that have like the pop-up destinations around the
Yes.
holidays, I think are just fascinating. Where the
Look
company I
at
used
that
to
line
work
of
at,
trucks.
that's
Yikes.
crazy. We used to do Christmas trees and pumpkins
Love it.
at the company that I worked at. And so it was always like one of those like feast or famine, like you have to get these shipments in, otherwise you're going to lose the contract. And if you lose the
Yeah.
contract, then that's seasonal freight that, is going to be really challenging to get fulfilled or keep that customer in the future. There's another video that
Yeah.
you
So this video, this is actually a customer I used to have, and I love them because they had this snazzy way of loading. They basically have these ramps, and you'll see here they use like these forklifts, and one forklift will bring over the tree, the other one will load it in there. So the thing again about Christmas trees is a lot of times when you're negotiating with carriers, they're like, listen, I'm gonna like murder my whole day with these. It's gonna take forever to load. These guys would get, on average, these trees loaded in less than an hour.
Oh, wow.
Sometimes the most I'd see it was like 2 hours, and that was if they had more than one truck there. They're a small company, so that rarely happened. But there was nothing I loved more than selling those loads. There was some times where I would bet drivers, like I'd tell them like, it's Christmas trees and but it won't take that long to load. They'll get you in and out in likely an hour. And they'd be like, that's not possible. And I would be like, bet, how about this? I'll put in the Raycon. If it takes you more than an hour, you owe me $50. If it and like, I would have fun with it because they would never believe me, and they would call me afterwards and like, yeah, you're right. And I'm like, yeah, I don't know what they're doing over there, but they just like, they got it down. There was also another really fun company that we worked with that they would take a while to load, but they had built like a whole like game shed for carriers. So like carriers could go take naps. They had like beds in there. They had
Oh,
like,
that's cool.
they had like Xboxes and like all this stuff so you could play video games. And then they also bought like pizza or some type of like dinner every night. So yeah, you're going to be here for 8 hours, but you're going to get fed well. You're going to have a warm bathroom. You're going to have things to do. And again, drivers would like be like, sure. And then you get a call afterwards. And like, that was like low key a fun day. And like, yeah.
That's I think BCB Transport has like a whole like separate office just for their drivers, that it has like a whole kitchen area. So you can, there's typically food that's available there for you to eat. Or if you would want to cook something yourself, they have like recliners, TVs, showers, places where you can relax, just all catered specifically for the drivers. And so I think if you're taking care of your drivers, then that's a pretty good sign that you are, if you have a dedicated space like that.
Yeah. It's easier to sell too as a broker, right? Like, let people know that stuff, because that stuff will bring your rates down more than you think.
Heck yeah. And it'll also make for happy drivers. Tell other drivers about their happy situation. And then if you have a bunch of happy drivers working for you, then you're probably going to have more on-time shipments. You're going to maybe be able to lower your insurance premium because they're being safer. There's lots of residual effects to that.
Yep.
Okay. This next one. So my source to porch one, which I really enjoyed the Christmas one. So I will make a note of that to set. My plan for these is to isolate them out, these different segments and these different clips. So we'll have a clip of the Christmas tree example that we can upload all out to social media in order to share like the goodness of these kinds of stories. Because I love these kinds of stories. These are also examples. Freight marketing has been a theme. These are examples stories that you could be telling within your own office. Right. So for mine in particular, I don't know if you've ever heard of this, but it's called the friendly floaties. Have you ever heard of this? No. Just like off the top, you never heard of that phrase. Okay. So have you ever wondered what happens to a container if it falls off of a cargo ship?
Yes, because I lost some Ivy Park merchandise from a ship that lost containers. I never got my socks. So, oh my God. Yeah. So basically, Beyonce has like a bunch of stuff at the bottom of the ocean, or maybe not. Are you telling me that it's somewhere?
Well, it depends on the product that was actually being shipped, because the overwhelming majority, and I'll play this clip here in just a second, but the overwhelming majority of freight, when it falls off of one, maybe weather patterns or, rough seas, obviously weather affects the rough seas. So what happens is these containers will fall off, and it just becomes either a salvage situation where you can claim salvage rights, or it becomes a situation where they're just going to immediately be at the bottom of the ocean. So let me play this quick clip, because this particular freight that got lost was pretty buoyant. And so it hung around for a little while. Let me play the clip.
Cargo. Think about it. A container with 2 cars inside will obviously sink when it floods, while the same container filled with bath toys will instead stay afloat. This is actually what happened in 1992 when the Ever Laurel lost some of her containers in a storm while on passage between Asia and the USA. One container that went over had over 28,000 bath toys inside, meaning that even when the container flooded, it would still remain afloat because the toys would displace so much water, generating enough buoyancy for themselves and the steel container. Of course, we know that for whatever reason the toys got out, so that container will have sunk, while the toys spent the next few decades riding the ocean currents, giving scientists an unexpected insight into ocean flow patterns worldwide. Anyway, the point is, the only way for a container to remain afloat for a prolonged period is for it to contain cargo that is sufficiently buoyant, and for that cargo to remain secure enough that it doesn't get out.
So I'll set that up
crazy.
a little bit more, but that's essentially what happens. It depends on the cargo that is actually being shipped. And so this particular incident is called the Friendly Floaties spill. And it was a bunch of bath toys, like not bath toys, but like rubber duckies, some other bath type animals that have a similar like buoyancy level to it. And because of this situation, that all of these rubber duckies, literally 28,000 of these rubber duckies were released into the ocean. We're still finding them to this day. This happened in 1994, I believe is what the video said. But we learned so much about ocean currents from this spill because there was this doctor that or this professor that studied where all of these rubber duckies were ending up, and some of them were ending up in the Australian coastline. We figured out that to go through one full ocean current cycle takes 1 year. So these duckies, they were still washing up a year later in massive. I mean, there was 28,000 of them, so they were ending up in all areas of the world. And what I thought was really cool is that for a lot of us that we didn't understand, especially those who work in ocean shipping, they didn't understand a lot of how these ocean currents work, and what we don't know what we don't know, right? And so for some of these companies, especially how trade lanes are established. So trade lanes meaning what route is your ship going to take from one country's port to another port? What's the most efficient way to do that, where you can kind of ride the currents and get there more efficiently, avoid the bad weather. It's very, very booking a ship is very similar to booking a truck. And I don't know why that blew my mind when I found out about it. I just assumed you book the ship and it takes the quickest point, from port to port. That's not the case. They use different ocean currents. And because of that situation, they were able to find and establish new trade lanes based on on how the little rubber duckies ended up all over the place. And I thought that was so cool. And another cool part of this is that it was turned into a children's book. So it's called Ducky. I ordered this yesterday, so it actually should get here. I was hoping it would get here in time, but it hasn't gotten here yet. But let me share this little book. And it is so cute.
Oh my God. You should send that to Lauren Began. She just had a baby too, and she loves maritime.
Isn't this cute? And so it got me thinking, how are we teaching kids about the supply chain? If you're just listening to this, it's the cutest little rubber duck that's on the cover of it. It's called Ducky. And one of the intro pages says, "I am a yellow plastic duck and I am in great danger. Yesterday, I was snuggled safe with hundreds of other bathtub toys. We were in a crate on a big ship. A storm came and our crate was washed overboard." So it shows a little picture of a wet, duck that is obviously scared, and all of the different things that you learn from this. And so I thought that was one of those stories that I was like, oh, this is such a cool video. And let me really quick, that video that we just listened to came from Casual Navigation on YouTube. That it's a great follow for sort of casual navigation stories. But I thought that was when I saw that video, and I was looking up on Wikipedia on how this story sort of evolved, and all of the insights that came from learning about the ocean shipping patterns and things like that, and learning where these different where I guess salvage rights, and we could spend probably an entire show on salvage rights. Yes, it's just so ancient and fascinating. And there was this other video that I did want to show too, because that's really the cute side of it. So that the children's book came out of it, but then on the other side, is where I wanted to loop it back around to cargo crime, because some of these floating containers just end up in the middle of the sea or middle of the ocean, and it causes danger for some of, like, maybe sailboats, for example, because only part of the container is kind of sticking up out of the water, and you don't have time to maneuver around it. So if it hasn't sunk yet, depending on the product that it's carrying, it might remain buoyant for, longer than you would imagine. But then there was another incident where, and I'll share this tab here, of these other folks that stumbled upon, these merchant, I think fishermen, that stumbled upon a container that was floating in the middle of the ocean, and it had cigarettes in it.
Oh, hell yes.
So all of the merchants, they cut
oh my God.
a container that's floating in the middle of the ocean. And so they start ripping out all of the cigarettes from the ship. Obviously, you probably see that if you're a fisherman and you're like, oh, well, what's in here? Salvage rights, technically, you can seize that. You can lay claim as long as nobody else is laying claim, like ownership wise, which if you think about it, I'm sure, the insurance companies maybe saw this video and maybe had something to say about this process. But I thought it was a really cool case of like, okay, this is what happens when it's stuff that people actually want, that they're going to find a way, or just
hell yeah,
that they're going to try to find out what's inside of there and see if it's worth anything. And I'm sure for a lot of these guys on the boat, finding a lot of those cigarettes, boxes and boxes, it was estimated to be millions of dollars in cargo worth of just cigarettes.
Oh my God. Especially depending on what country they're from, like even if they have that type. Oh, that's so cool. Oh, those guys just are like generational wealth. Like we just hit the jackpot.
And one last quick thing, because I know you got to go, but there's another incident of this is such an insane story, because it led me down this rabbit hole of, okay, like, salvage rights. Well, what technically is salvage rights, and what can come from these types of different conversations? And so for this other example, have you ever, it's wild, because there's an example of a person that, or a British pilot, he ran into some trouble. He had about a minute of fuel left in his plane. He had to do an emergency landing. And the closest thing around him was a cargo ship. He had to land the jet on top of the containers on a floating cargo ship in order to not die. So he's a British pilot. He landed on a Spanish or a cargo plane or cargo ship from Spain. So Spain ends up claiming salvage rights on the jet, and then they're able to get the British to pay to get the jet back. And it's wild, because obviously you're in the middle of the ocean. It's a little bit slippery. So this plane is it covers it, once it lands on top of the containers, then they hit some waves and it falls back and hits a van that's on top of the cargo ship. And so let me play this video, because it's wild that this reporter is doing a story in front of this. So I'll pull this up on the screen now.
It's crazy.
Okay, here we go.
In the end, it's been a story of mixed fortune for Lieutenant Watson. Warming up for his first major NATO exercise, he suddenly finds himself in the headlines and 4 days adrift from his Harrier squadron. For the way in which he skillfully managed to land on this crowded cargo deck, there was much praise and much relief. But the worrying question remains, exactly how did he find himself in such a dire situation in the first place? So Lieutenant Watson's fate is still not certain. But as a party of British naval engineers and mechanics got to work attaching lifting gear onto the Harrier, clear that no action would be taken until a Naval Board of Inquiry has investigated the affair. The Harrier will be taken back to the United Kingdom after being loaded onto a British tanker, which is expected in Tenerife tomorrow afternoon.
Isn't that insane?
So crazy. And then it's just so nuts that, like, it's not technically owned by them at that point either. Interesting.
And that's what ended up happening with the case.
How did he land like that?
I guess like the jet propulsion, that he could just land straight down, almost like a helicopter. Because that was my first question too, is like, how the hell do you land on a cargo ship? Because I've been on a naval carrier before, and they have the area where you can land and take off, but to land straight down obviously takes a lot of skill, and apparently that pilot had only completed about 75% of his training. That's
that
a
kid's
pretty
like
good pilot.
18 years old. Yeah, geez. Wow, that's incredible.
So that was
That's
that's how I brought it back to the cargo crimes, is that Spain basically found themselves in the hands of a British jet and made the Brits pay to have it back, which is probably one of the few ways that you can get the Brits to give things back nowadays.
yeah, just steal. Yeah, exactly.
Just have a salvage rights. So if any museum, especially like Egypt or anybody else that's looking to get some of your stuff back, maybe try salvage rights, because
Yeah.
the Brits do listen when it comes to that.
That's so funny.
All right. Well, I know you got to go. I'm sorry. We're a few minutes after 3.
We're
We did
good.
another banger of an episode. Any last things you want to mention? Any stories you're working on? Things like that. Did you have a cargo crime story you want to highlight? Like, go ahead. The floor is yours.
I don't think that I have a new one, but I will say, of course, busy over here with Freightways getting ready for this last quarter. I think we're all interested, right, and where the market's going to go, what consumer demand is going to be like. I'm very interested. We don't really expect a huge increase of rates until next, I'd say, March, spring, April type of time. Maybe even late summer, if you ask me. But interested in what consumer spending is going to be like for the holidays, so really keeping my eye on that and some data that we'll get over the next couple weeks. I mean, we're wrapping up this wonderful quarter, so that's a huge thing too. So yeah, just getting excited for everyone out there. Reach out to me if you have interesting technology that you want to showcase or just want to talk about. That's a lot of what I do all day long, is talking with companies and what they're working on. So love meeting new ones in particular, and just continue to keep up the good work, Blythe. I'm impressed. We're just talking about your numbers the other day. It was incredible. So everyone, make sure you go check out all of her content too.
Oh, thanks. Well, I mean, I obviously, working with folks like yourself, people love these types of episodes that we do together. And I think we cover so much ground. And a lot of times if I'm being honest with myself, I don't do a good enough job of promoting all of the great content that, we have done together. So that's going to be changing here soon. Just hired my first digital marketing assistant.
Let's
so
go.
So we're making, little moves over here. We didn't offshore it, hired local, which I'm very, very proud of. Proud to finally get the budget to do so.
Yeah.
But yeah, appreciate the kind words, and appreciate your time and what you give to this show. And I know a lot of other folks really like enjoying and seeing the freight gossip side of things, but also the cool stories of freight that we can highlight on this show. So appreciate your time. Appreciate everybody who is watching and engaging with the show. We'll be back next month with another edition. But if you want to catch any of the other episodes of Freight Friends with Grace Sharkey, we are going to have a YouTube playlist. We'll link it in the show notes. So these types of episodes, if you like watching them, then you can binge watch the rest of them. But that about does it for this week's show. So thank you guys again for tuning in. Real quick, go Jags. And for you,
go Lions. We're going Lions, because if they win, man, this is going to be a fun episode to listen back to.
Heck yeah. Cat Team Brotherhood, unite.
Yes.